I want to share with you today one of the coolest things I've ever thought about. It gets at the question of how a bee with a brain the size of a pepper speck can travel miles and back from food and not get lost. If I were to ask you how you get to Walmart, to understand this, you need to stop thinking like a human. You would first envision the entire route in your head, and then you recite a series of instructions that I would need to follow in order to get there. Head to the corner, make a left, go to the post office, make a right, go 4 more blocks, and it's going to be there on your left. The bee would say, I can't give you the directions, but if you just follow me, I'll take you there. And that's because she doesn't actually know the way. Instead, we think she's flying towards whatever is most familiar. And if she's been to Walmart once, she can get there again. It's kind of like navigation by Deja vu, and that's what I want to share with you today. Now, my talk's going to start by talking about bees, but then later in the talk, I'll switch over and say a little bit about scorpions and how we think they might be navigating. So as I'm sure you know, bees will leave their hives, they fly out to flower sources, they gather their cargo, and they fly back to their hives. Now, we think they're following very simple behavioral rules to do this. 1, look around. 2, if you see something familiar, fly forward. 3, if you don't see something that looks familiar, look around some more and repeat. Now, to really understand how this might work, I need for you to think about looking at the world through a bee's compound eyes. So bees' eyes are pairs of these incredible mosaics of light-sensing units called ommatidia. Now, each ommatidian is directed at its own blurred piece of the visual world. So we can think of the bee's eyes as pairs of matrices. Now, to really understand the power of this principle, I need to take you on a little excursion through matrix math. Let's say you just had one light bulb, and it was either off or on. You would have 2 possible states, right? What if you had 2 light bulbs, and they could be either off or on independently? How many different patterns would you have? You'd have 4, right? Okay, what if you had 4 light bulbs, and they could all be on or off independently? How many states? Well, as you can see, you'd have 16 different possibilities. So the way to work this out is to take the number of states and raise it to the number of bulbs, so 2 to the 4th is 16. Now, what if you had an 8 by 8 array of 64 light bulbs? Well, that's 2 to the 64th, which is a number I cannot even pronounce. Well, how many ommatidia do these insects actually have? Well, desert ants have about 500 per eye. Houseflies have 750. Honeybees, 4,500. And dragonflies are off the charts at 28,000 ommatidia for each eye. Let's just take a desert ant with her 2 eyes. So between her 2 eyes of 500, she would have 1,000 pixels in her eye. So 2 to the 1,000th is this. And that's spelled out would be this. So they have this incredible capacity for unique detections with the ommatidia in their eye. So that's the number of possible unique detections, but how many glimpses or experiences would she have in her entire lifetime? Well, they live a couple of months, so about 60 days, and at 24 hours in a day and 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute, and let's say they have a frame capture rate of 60 per second. So if you add all that up, you get about 300 million glimpses for her entire lifetime, which I think you can see is a much, 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 much smaller number than the one over there. So it's theoretically possible that she could hold and accommodate a lifetime's worth of unique glimpses. But you might be saying, well, how many, is it possible that 2 scenes might look alike? That is, if she stumbled on something that looked familiar, she would get lost or confused. Well, it's a great question. So I'm going to take you on a quick ride across the San Francisco skyline. Here we go. we're going to fly across the buildings. Soon we're going to bank to the right, and we're going to head out towards the bay. And now I'm going to turn these scenes to black and white. And then in a moment, I'm going to superimpose a simple 6x6 matrix over each, and I'm coloring in red those parts that are mostly black, and white those parts that are mostly white. And as you can see in this very simple experiment with a very simple matrix, no two scenes were the same. In fact, I would like to boldly claim that this scene I'm looking at right here, if I were to break this into 1,000 pixels, would be different from every other scene in the entire world. And the only closest matches would be this one right here, and this one right here, this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here. So we think the bee may experience the world as a series of unique QR codes. Well, to summarize where we are so far, pixelated eyes can match all scenes, and no two scenes are alike. So to fly home, the bee simply needs to fly towards whatever scene she's seen. It's a bit like navigation by Deja vu. We don't think that she needs to hold the sequences of scenes in order or memorize directions. It's the stability of nature that stores the sequence, and that takes an enormous burden off the bee's brain. Well, my brother Arthur got me thinking about this in about 1980, and this is Arthur, and this is how we spent essentially every family get-together, okay? Now, Arthur was watching in the late 70s some yellow jackets fly, and he had an aha moment in which he thought he knew how they did it, how they navigated. So he was considering the power of a pixelated eye, and he went and built this prototype. I actually still have it on the shelf in my lab. It's composed of an array of photodiodes, which are connected to a processor, to some memory chips, to a light array for a monitor, and a speaker that makes some output. It's only 16 photodiodes that are directed by these sleeves to different parts of the visual world. I'm going to try to demonstrate how it works for you. So, here's the eye, and I'm going to run it across a simple black and white landscape. You're going to hear some pops. Those pops are new memories being formed each time the eye encounters something new. And so here we go. All right, I'm going to pull that eye back to the beginning, and I'm going to make saccades or arcs over the area. Now it's going to make a sound each time it sees something it's encountered before, and I'm going to let the sound be my guide for which way to go, kind of like a Geiger counter. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to stop that because I know that's really annoying. And let me summarize what you're seeing here. In blue, this is the training path that I ran. And here in red, those are the points that the eye went when I made the recapitulation run. I analyzed the sound intensity with distance from the training path, and I got this graph. And from this graph, I was able to estimate, you see, the farther away you get from the graph, the sound goes down. So I estimated this catchment area of familiarity relative to the training path. It's a bit like a water slide at Whitewater Bay, right? If you fall into the catchment area of the water slide, the outcome's inevitable. You're only going to go in one direction and all the way to the splash zone. So I met up with a team of researchers from the University of Sussex who was thinking about the same thing. We asked ourselves, could we simulate the bee's simple navigational rules by making a computer program that could trace paths over satellite images, such as those obtained from Google Earth? So I went there for my sabbatical. Here's the University of Sussex outside of Brighton, England. And this is a close-up of the campus, which we first turned to black and white. We next made a grid of 1,000 images across the entire campus. And we circularized and pixelated each of those images, and you can see two neighboring ones over there on the side. It kind of looks like what a bee might see through her compound eyes. So this next scene is a Matlab interface that we developed. You're first going to see a yellow training path in the form of the University of Sussex logo. Then we're going to start the bee at the beginning, and you're going to see these blue arcs, which are the saccades, kind of like I did with my brother's eye. Off to the top right, you'll see each current scene being seen, and then you'll see in the bottom right the chosen best match scene. In red will be the bee's final course. So here we go. Watch it closely. You see the red is tracking the yellow quite well. It has to look around a little bit at the corners, but it quickly picks up the path and gets back and goes all the way to the end. We even challenged this to see if we could track a complex path that crosses over itself, something that's not very likely to happen in nature. But in this scene, in this complex path over Amsterdam, it could even do this. Now we expanded this idea to see if we could track images that we acquired across our lab. So we snapped panoramic pictures in a 5-inch by 5-inch grid across the entire laboratory, out the door and into the hallway. And just like you saw before, we challenged to see if we could track a complex path. So the blue is the complex path, and I'm going to let it go. The dots to the side, those are the saccades, and the red is the best match scene. As you see, it's cruising across the lab. Here it's going to find the door, and it's going to snake all the way to the end. We could even do this with a very low sensor resolution. Now I'm going to replay the same thing, but put it on top of a contour map that shows the catchment areas, that shows the visual catchment areas of similarity. And you'll see it falls down into the canyon, it follows the canyon, and it goes all the way to the end of the line. In fact, if you started at some place, it would just fall down the slope and it would not get lost. It will only go in one direction. This is all based on static images that we made across the lab. I just want to show you a quick run, a free running system of the system here. So what you're going to see is my research associate, Brad. He's going to push a cart, and it's got a camera on it, and it's got the program. He's going to make some complex training path across the hall and into the lab. Okay, Brad, come on out. Brad's had a lot of coffee. Okay. So now I was sequestered away, so I didn't see that. And Brad gave me the cart and took me back to the beginning. And I've got headphones on, and I'm listening to the sounds that the computer makes each time it sees something it's seen before. And I'm using those sounds to be my guide for which way to go, just like we did with my brother's eye. And here we go. Now, I'm not sure what that student was thinking about this crazy professor coming at him, but nonetheless. So it works, as you see, it works really quite well. So again, it's kind of like the water slide, right? You fall into this catchment area, and it will take you all the way to the end of the path. Now, I promised to finish a little bit talking about scorpions, and something similar might be going on with them. So these animals live in these beautiful sand dunes throughout the desert southwest here. Here is Eureka Dunes, and this is just north of Death Valley in California. And this is a scorpion burrow, so they live underground, and they come out at night to hunt. Here's one my wife photographed at the threshold of its burrow under ultraviolet light. These animals fluoresce this incredible blue-green color under UV light. So scorpions come out of their burrows for a couple of hours after sundown, and they hunt. And somehow they must find their way back to their burrow, kind of like the bee did. Now, scorpions have lots of cool things, but one of the coolest things are these paired combs called pectins that extend from their bellies. Let me try to back that up one more time. Now, most people carry just one comb, but I've actually got two, so I can demonstrate how these things work, okay? So there are these paired combs that hang down from the bellies of scorpions, and all scorpions have them. They're composed of a spine and a series of movable teeth. On the tips of each of the teeth are hundreds of little tiny dots. And one grain of sand would fill this entire screen for scale. If I expand this, you see those dots turn into a forest of pegs. And these pegs are all oriented perpendicular to the way the ground travels. And inside of each of those pegs, there's about 10 or 15 nerve cells that respond to chemicals such as pheromones. And there's even one that responds to touch. Now, I had an incredible undergraduate come to my lab a few years back named Elise. And Elise did an exhaustive survey of the peg responses. And by and large, she found that they all respond similarly to a variety of chemicals. And so we got to thinking, oh, maybe the pectin is sort of like a bee's compound eye, but instead of detecting a complex matrix of visual information, it detects a matrix of taste and touch. So perhaps the scorpion is able to sense the taste and tactile features of the sand around its burrow, and it's using this to get home. At this point, we don't know, but this is what we want to test. So that's the idea I'm chasing. We think it's a powerful one. We think it could lead to lots of new technology applications, such as it doesn't take much memory, so it's light, and it doesn't depend on pre-existing maps or squadrons of GPS satellites. So it might be good for self-driving cars that repeatedly travel the same route. It's adaptable, so it adapts to anything that's in front of it now. So it would quickly learn the nuances of a disaster scene where the roads have been obliterated. So it might be very useful in search and rescue. It might be useful for visual augmentation because it works both indoors and outdoors. And it might even be useful for exploring other planets. Well, I hope I've gotten you as passionate and interested in bee navigation as I am. We think there's all kinds of really cool applications to this, and I thank you so much for your attention.